How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. As we all know, a whole bunch of Overwatch World Cup rosters have been getting revealed over the last couple of days, and since yesterday Team USA and Team Canada revealed theirs, I figured I'd go out and react to them and tell you guys what I think. And yes, I know that Team USA actually hasn't revealed their 7-man roster for the World Cup yet, but looking at their 12-man roster gives us a good idea of who's been doing well in tryouts. Team Canada, on the other hand, revealed their 12-man roster and who made their final 7 on the same day, but I want to start off with the US because that's the country I'm from after all, so without wasting any more time, let's get straight into things. I suppose I should start off with an overview of the 12-man roster. So at tank, they have Muma, Super, Fact Fiction, and Space. Then on DPS, there's Dante, Corey, Sinatra, KSF, and Hydration. And then finally on support, there's Sleepy, Moth, and Raucous. Okay, so a big thing to take away from this roster is that there's 3 main tanks on it, and if I had to take a guess, I would say that the competition between these 3 guys has been really intense. The competition between these 3 must be so great that Coach Arrow and the rest of the Team USA committee just can't make up their minds. And another reason to think that these 3 guys have been playing each other really close is because a lot of the other Overwatch World Cup rosters out there just have 1 main tank or 2 at most. Even on a 12-man roster, I feel like having 3 main tanks is kind of unheard of and really bizarre overall. But you have to take a look at what Muma, Super, and Fact Fiction all bring to the table because they all are really talented players. That much is certain, but who is the best possible main tank for Team USA? Now, I personally don't know what's been going on in tryouts. I don't know who's doing well, who's doing bad. But one thing I do know is that Muma, Super, and Fact Fiction are all really talented guys, and it's hard to go wrong with any of them. Let's discuss some of their weaknesses and strengths to get a better idea of who the best possible option is for Team USA on main tank. So starting off with Muma and his weaknesses. Well, in my opinion, he's never been the best Reinhardt in the world. I believe he's kind of inconsistent on that hero, and he's just struggled with him overall at certain points in the past. And also, another problem I have with Muma is that he's not the greatest leader in the world. Now, obviously, he's really good at shot calling and communication because he's a main tank, and that's what main tanks are good at usually. But I feel that he lacks in other categories. I see him more as like a follower. He's not a leader. He doesn't lead by example or anything like that. He kind of just follows the rest of the guys, I feel like. But I feel that Muma can at least kind of make up for this with some of his strengths. Because after all, he has a pretty good hero pool. I know his Ryan isn't the best, but his Wrecking Ball, Winston, and Orisa are all solid, and I feel that he's a really good playmaker for someone at the main tank position. He gets a lot done, and he's one of the carries for the Houston Outlaws sometimes, I feel. And that's a really good quality to have, right? You need somebody who can be clutch and make plays on any sort of team, whether it's Overwatch related or in like another esport, real life sports. You need somebody who can step up and make some huge plays, and I feel that Muma's very capable of that. But then again, last year he was on the World Cup, and he didn't look too hot. Is it all his fault? No, of course not. I believe that other players could have definitely stepped up to make his life easier, but overall, I was not very impressed with what I saw from him, and Fusion's basically just completely outplayed him. But at the same time, I don't want to assume that he'll do bad in the World Cup again if he gets another chance, because you never know. Maybe he was just not comfortable in the GOATS meta, and he'll do a lot better in a 2-2-2 role-lock. So now moving on to Super, I think the big weakness that most people point out with him is that his Reinhardt is definitely like miles ahead of his other main tanks, meaning that his Winston and his Orisa, they're just not nearly as good. But that's probably the only noticeable weakness in his game, because after all, like I said, his Reinhardt is really strong, even though Rein isn't all that useful in a 2-2-2 lock. And also, unlike Muma, Super definitely has those really good leadership qualities that you're looking for. You can just tell from his streams and from when he plays on the Shock that he's a high energy guy. He knows how to pump his teammates up and inspire confidence in the rest of his teammates by making some really clutch plays just like Muma would. Most of those really big plays we've seen him make in the past have come on Reinhardt. Could he do the same on a hero like Wrecking Ball, Winston, or Orisa? It's yet to be determined whether or not he can do that. Now let's move on to Fact Fiction. And out of all of these guys, I would say that he's the most well-rounded. There isn't really much of a weakness with this guy other than that he's not the best at any of the main tanks. Like, he's really good at all of them, but he's not a superstar in any of them, if that makes any sense. But you could definitely tell that Fact Fiction is a pretty good leader overall, and he has experience in the World Cup already. He was on the team in 2017, and I always thought he did pretty good in that game against South Korea. I know that the US lost and everything, but he held his own weight for sure, and that's back when he wasn't nearly as good as he is now. All 3 of these guys are definitely qualified to be the main tank for Team USA, but I personally believe that either Super or Fact Fiction deserves the job the most. No disrespect to Muma at all, I think that he's good, but on the Outlaws, he hasn't looked all that hot this year, and I feel that Super and Fact Fiction have been putting in a lot of work. The other thing you're going to notice about the tanks is that Space is the only off-tank player on the list, and if this is the case, I'm assuming he blew out all of his competition, like it wasn't even close, and that doesn't really come as much of a surprise for me at least, because Space is a god. We all know this. He is probably the best flex tank in the United States. Why settle for something that's less than the best, you know? That just doesn't make any sense at all, and again, I'm assuming that Space just blew out all of his competition like it was nothing, and in fact, Arrow himself said that Space was one of the people who really impressed in tryouts, so that's why he's here. Moving on to DPS, the big thing you're going to notice is that the only projectile specialist on the roster is Hydration. There's no Blase to be seen, so it's kind of guaranteed almost that Hydration's going to be on the team, I feel like, when it comes down to the final 7. There's no one else on here who really specializes in playing Pharah or Genji or anything like that. He's definitely the best on those heroes compared to everybody else on the list. Things get a bit tougher when it comes down to Dante, Corey, Sinatra, and KSF because all of them could very well end up making the team. They're all super talented dudes, and it all depends on what you want, really. If you want someone who can dominate on Sombra at a world-class level, then you probably want to roll with Dante. He can also play some Tracer and maybe a little bit of Pharah or Hanzo as well. And if you want a solid Widowmaker, then you'd likely want to put on Corey or KSF just because they're both really nasty on that hero, and they're just pretty solid at hit scan overall, but Corey's definitely the best hit scan. We all know and love Corey for his Widowmaker, but he can play pretty much any hit scan hero at a very high level. He's got a good McCree, he can play Soldier, Tracer, Sombra, whatever the heck you need, but the same can be said for KSF. Maybe he's not quite as good on those heroes as Corey, but he can get the job done. He's very serviceable, and he's got a really solid Hanzo. And while Sinatra's hero pool probably isn't quite as valuable as the other guys I talked about, he definitely can be of use in any sort of dive meta since he's really good at all of the flanker heroes. He can play Tracer at an unbelievably high level. He's got a good Sombra. He can play Doomfist. All of those heroes he definitely excels at. Plus, unlike all the other guys on this list, Sinatra's kind of a World Cup veteran at this point. Yes, he's only 19 years old, but if he does end up making the team, this would be his 3rd year in a row representing Team USA. Sure, Sinatra has lost in the first round with Team USA both years that he's been on the team, but I feel that he'll be able to lead as an example and just be the leader that some of these other people who have not represented their country before need. Plus, Sinatra has pre-existing synergy with a bunch of people on this list because of the World Cup or the Overwatch League. So Sinatra has played with Muma, Super, Fact Fiction, Space, Dante, Hydration, Sleepy, Moth, and Raucous. He's played with each of these guys at least once in the past, and I'm sure he'd be really good with the likes of Super, Sleepy, and Moth because all of them have either played with Sinatra on the Shock before or are still his teammate to this day. Sinatra definitely checks off a lot of the boxes you want in a World Cup player, but I feel that his hero pool just doesn't cut it. It's not good enough. Yes, he's really good at the flanker heroes, and he probably would excel in any sort of dive meta, but if Double Sniper ends up still being really popular by the time the World Cup comes around, then Sinatra's kind of useless. On his stream, Sinatra himself said that he is not good at the sniper heroes. In fact, he said he sucks at them. And if that's the case, then you definitely don't want Sinatra playing your Widowmaker or Hanzo. He'd get absolutely destroyed. Instead, you'd be better off going with the likes of Corey or KSF, or maybe both of them at the same time. If I'm Team USA, I would go with Hydration for the sake of projectile. Then on hitscan, you'd likely want Corey or KSF. They're probably the best too. And then I would go with Dante just for the fact that his Sombra is absolutely insane, and he gives everybody nightmares, even South Korean players. And finally, as we move on to supports, the big thing that jumps out to me is that Moth is the only main support player who ended up making the roster, which means that him and Space are both guaranteed to end up making the final 7 unless something happens where Moth has to drop out for some reason. And in my opinion, Moth is definitely the best option at the main support position, especially when you consider the fact that his only competition, aka Elk, decided not to try out because he wanted to focus on contenders in Korea with Fusion University. But I think even if Elk did try out, that Moth would most likely get an over him still, just because Moth has been a very consistent player on the San Francisco Shock this year, and a lot of people are even saying that he's like a top 5 main support in the league. And he's also a really good leader. We know that he's like the person who keeps all the Shock players in check if they get too excited. He's perfect. I have no complaints whatsoever about Moth making Team USA. But moving on to flex support now, things are a little bit more interesting because the committee has to choose between Sleepy or Raucous. And if you're wondering where Dogman is and why he didn't make it, well, he did say on his Twitter that he tried out, but he just failed to make it. He wasn't as good as Raucous or Sleepy apparently in the tryouts. The choice is either Sleepy or Raucous. So how do you choose who you want? Who is the better fit? Well, in my opinion, it comes down to what you want more on your team. Do you want someone who has more of a veteran presence like Raucous, or do you want someone who's a bit better at playmaking like Sleepy? If you select someone like Raucous, then you're going to have someone who has good experience and will be able to be one of the foundations of the team, But at the same time, Ruckus just isn't that good in-game, I feel. I know he's been doing a lot better as of late on that Ana for the Houston Outlaws compared to like stage 1 or 2, let's say, but he's such an inconsistent player. I just have my doubts about him being able to keep up this level of play up until the World Cup. Sleepy, on the other hand, is probably a bit more consistent, and in my opinion, his hero pool is a bit better since his Zenyatta is a lot better than Ruckus's, and you can make the argument his Ana is better as well, but also, Sleepy doesn't make those kinds of positioning errors that sometimes plague Ruckus. His positioning overall, I feel, is a bit better, and I know some people argue, well, Ruckus is probably the better leader, but Sleepy has been working on his leadership qualities quite a bit since joining the Washington Justice, so I don't think it'll be much of an issue. In my eyes, Sleepy is the clear-cut choice to have at the starting flex support role, and as a bonus, he has previous synergy with some of his former Shock teammates like Super, Dante, Sinatra, and Moth. So that's where I currently stand on Team USA's 12-man roster and who could potentially end up making the final 7, but overall, I'm pretty pleased with who made the final 12, and I really do like the fact that there's a lot of competition at both main tank and DPS. Now let's move on to Team Canada, and things are a bit more interesting over there because there's nothing really to discuss in terms of who I want to see on the final roster since they already revealed who made their final 7. What's great about Team Canada is that they revealed their 7-man and 12-man roster on the same day, but obviously we don't care too much about the 12-man roster at this point. It's all about who made the final 7. So here's who made it. XQC, Note, Agilities, Surefour, Mangachu, Bonnie, and Crimzo will be representing Team Canada yet again. This is the same exact team from 2018. I'm not very surprised, if I'm going to be completely honest, that this is the 7-man roster because before tryouts started, this is the roster I thought they'd roll out with so long as XQC decided to participate in tryouts, which he clearly did since he's on the team. Can we all please give some credit to XQC for somehow still making Team Canada even though he's been out of the loop in terms of the pro scene for like a year now? That is super impressive. Up until recently, the dude basically only played Overwatch sometimes and did a lot of variety streams, but then when Team Canada tryouts rolled around, he decided to get serious, and although it was a little bit rough at first, I think he did find his footing by the time it ended. But now the question is, will XQC be able to hold his own against some of the top tier main tanks in the world after not playing in the pro scene for so long? If I had to take a guess, I would say probably not, but you never know with him. Even last year, after getting kicked off of the Dallas Fuel and just focusing on streaming, he still held his own in the World Cup and helped Canada get a 3rd place finish. I definitely do have my concerns about XQC, but if he can shake off the rust, then maybe he'll do okay. So now we have to talk about Note. Since this is a little bit of a controversial pick for some people, I personally don't have much of a problem with it just because Note is really good. He's a world-class talent and he can do well on just about any team. We've seen it with the Uprising, we've seen it with the Fuel, and even on Team Canada last year. But the problem is that Muffin, his counterpart who also played off-tank during the tryouts, did really well, and a lot of people agree that he did better than Note. So was Note a bad selection? No, of course not. He's a god. But was he the right one? Well, it's hard to say, because again, Muffin popped off. I watched a lot of the scrims from Team Canada's tryouts, and I have to agree that Muffin looked pretty good both on the Roadhog and the Diva. I definitely did like what I saw from him. One thing I noticed with this guy is that he talked a lot. I mean, he was super vocal during all of the games, and it felt like he meshed together with XQC pretty well. I definitely did enjoy watching him play, and it's a shame that he didn't get to make the team. Whether you believe Note deserves to be here or not, one thing we all have to agree upon is that he's extremely skilled. So even though Muffin probably did a little bit better in scrims overall, can you really say that Note is a bad selection? Like, I just don't think that's something you can say. It's very true that Note is only really good at Diva and that his Hog needs a lot of work, especially if a bunker meta does remain up until the World Cup, but I trust in Note. I think he has a really good work ethic, and if he puts in the time and effort, he will become a better Roadhog for sure. Moving on to the DPS, I don't think there's a single soul out there that would complain about Agilities, Surefour, and Mangachu being on the final 7 because they're all so damn good at the game, they're all super clutch, and all of their DPS hero pools complement each other pretty well. Surefour, as we all know, is a world-class hits game talent. He's insanely good at Widow, McCree, Sombra, you name it, he will be able to play it at the highest level possible, but then also, he's pretty flexible. He can go onto that Hanzo if you want to. But that probably won't be necessary since you have Agilities and Mangachu on the roster who are known for their projectile. They're both nasty at the Hanzo, Genji, Pharah, Junkrat, they can play it all, and a bunch more. Kind of like with last year, I'm a really big fan of this Agilities and Mangachu DPS rotation because there's so many different ways you can utilize them. The strategies are basically endless. You can choose to run one or the other based off of map or perhaps who your opponent is. There's so many different ways you can implement a strategy involving Agilities and Mangachu, and when all else fails, if you don't have a strategy, you can just play the hot hand. If Agilities is doing really well and Mangachu's cold, keep Agilities in for the rest of the game, or vice versa. Having more than one option is never a bad thing. Definitely a big fan of this DPS trio they've got going on. And now finally we have to talk about the support line, and again, no surprise whatsoever to see both Bonnie and Crimzo make it. It's kind of hard to say where Bonnie stands in terms of his skill compared to a lot of the other main supports in the World Cup, just because he hasn't been playing all that much on the Houston Outlaws this year. Boink has been getting all of the playtime, which means that the Outlaws either don't like what they've seen from Bonnie and Scrims, or they have really liked what Boink has done. But whether he's been popping off or been doing really bad on the Outlaws as of late, I feel that he's a really good fit on Team Canada, just like last year. Based off of what I've heard from the comms and tryouts, Bonnie is still a really vocal person, and he does a lot of the pre-game planning. What I mean by that is that Bonnie was usually the person to try and lay out a game plan before a round started while everybody was in spawn, and he'd be giving people instructions on what they should do, or he'd just be asking questions like, hey, do you guys want to start high ground here, or do you want to go low ground, and then if the enemy takes high ground, we dive them. He'd say simple things like that before a round started, and it kind of gave the team a good sense of direction on what they should do. Plus, we know that Bonnie can make some big time plays sometimes. We saw it last year in the World Cup. You definitely don't want to disrespect this guy, and even if he wasn't godly in the tryouts, I feel that he's going to be a really good in-game leader for Team Canada, just like with last year. And finally, there's the flex support god himself, Crimzo, and there's not much I have to say about him because he's so damn good at the game. Like, I have no complaints about him whatsoever. He's a fantastic Ana and Zenyatta player, he's very intelligent, and he's going to make big time plays for Team Canada just like he did last year for sure. I have high expectations for Crimzo this year. I personally believe that he is currently at the top of his game. He did really well in the Overwatch World Cup Team Canada tryouts, and him and Team Envy have been finding a lot of success in contenders. Overall, I would say that Team Canada is looking pretty promising just like with 2018. I wouldn't be shocked in the slightest if they end up getting a top 3 finish yet again. In my opinion, how far Team Canada goes depends on XQC and Note. If XQC can crack down and try his very best to get rid of the rust, and Note can learn how to play a better Roadhog and Zarya, then I'll have a lot of confidence in Team Canada moving forward. And with that being said, that is going to wrap up my reactions to the Team USA 12-man roster and the Team Canada 7-man roster. If you did enjoy this content, then I would appreciate it if you could like, comment, and subscribe. Oh, and one other thing. If you'd like me to react to Team USA 7-man roster when that comes out, or you want me to react to some other rosters, make sure to let me know down in the comment section. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching today's video. I really do appreciate it. And until next time, this is ATP, signing out. See ya!